Hello friends, Anderson here. Welcome to Ironsworn Chapter 2, Episode 14. This is turning into a long arc, but I think we're going to see the end of it soon. My expectation would be that the delve that we're currently undergoing leads us to the final confrontation with Ursula, unless further plot twists happen, which would, of course, never be the case considering it's only happened like 8 times before in this one so far. Anyway, when last we left Kynan, he was wondering about liking, commenting, and subscribe. No, wait, hang on. When last we left Kynan, he was in the lead up to entering a Varu settlement, the home of the Get of Ratka and his new companion, temporary, probably, Vata the scout, who he encountered somewhere further into the deep wilds, into this Ameshki, this Elderbriar area that we're currently delving. And we finished the episode on a positive match, which I took to mean that we find a person here, also just backed up by the find an opportunity table, a supportive Denizen who will be able to, well, shed some light on some things maybe, and also help us get our spirits up, because we're still sitting at an uncomfortable 0 spirit and we are tormented. So let's jump in and set the scene. Right, couple of things we need to know. We need to know where this Varu settlement is, and we need to know who this supportive Denizen is. I think we can narrow it down to some sort of elder, druid, shaman, spiritual leader. So the role, I think, isn't really in question, but we still need some details, some descriptors, both for the location and for the person. So I'd say let's get to it. Let's roll a descriptor and a location first to figure out what exactly this settlement looks like. We grab our percentage dice and go to work. I think for the purposes of interpreting this, we'll just use the custom descriptors of Delve and not the generic table. We have a 32, which puts us at a dense thicket. I'm not using the corrupted bit because that sort of stands to reason out of the narrative. So a dense thicket, and I will be using the generic location descriptor table to add a little bit of detail. 03 says remote. Well, that's a detail we probably could have come up with ourselves. Now, let's go for a Varu name to find out who this supportive Denizen is. We add the die 6 to determine 1 to 3 female, 4 to 6 male. 77 and a 2, that gives us Efka. I'll just note her down as Efka, the Varu speaker, and figure out some more details now. Let's go for 2 descriptors. 46 cunning, that would fit the job description, and 10 brave. Cunning and brave. I don't really feel we need a lot more at this stage. The goal at the moment and the role in society, I think all of that is sort of fictional framing. We can assume that the goal is to take care of the unpleasantness now arising from a resurging Ursula and this corruption that befell half of the Get of Ratka, and the role will be some sort of spiritual leader, spiritual advisor, and in that function she will also be able to communicate with Kynan, because we rolled a positive match, and I feel like we should give him some answers, since I feel like beyond some hints, most of what we now know and rolled up about what's going on in the background, and Ursula and Asha and Erin and all of that is not quite clear to Kynan yet. He has gotten some information from Morgan, but that's also a lot of rumors and speculation, and somebody in the position of being a Varu on the inside charged with guarding Ursula and knowing what's really gone on all those years ago, also with Erin, will be very useful to Kynan. So I will definitely want to add an aspect of giving him a rundown of what is really going on, which will also hopefully serve as a nice recap for us to keep all of these narrative strands in hand, because it's been a while since we've really reflected on all of that. And I think we can derive some spiritual succor from this as we come upon this settlement, which we do now. It's near full dark and Kynan has trouble following Vata, who graciously doesn't rush too far ahead now, especially after that Circle of Stone experience where this foolish human tumbled into one of those dangerous locations that every Varu child knows how to stay away from. And so Kynan orients himself by the broad-shouldered, wolf-like bipedal creature pushing through the exceedingly dense vegetation in front of him, and it's clear that Vata knows where he's going. And Kynan has no doubt that he knows where he's going, but Kynan also senses that had he not this guide now, he would never have found this place. It's a dense cluster of vegetation, of branches that need to be pushed out of the way, fallen logs that need to be crawled under, or trees that need to momentarily be mounted, and Kynan sees claw marks of many prior passages there. And presently they arrive in a cluster of enormous trees again, with a whole of brambles and branches weaving between them, and it's almost impossible to see from the ground, but as Vata signals through a series of low growls, a viney rope ladder tumbles out of the canopy above, and both of them ascend, and Kynan sees that there is a network of platforms and passageways and little huts built into the treetops above this densely interwoven thicket. And up top on that first platform that the rope ladder leads to, a group of Varu are already waiting for them, very likely having been informed by some advanced scouts that just saw their impending arrival and noted that Vata was coming here with a human. And what did they do? They went and fetched Efka, the elder, who is standing there, wizened, grayish, whitened fur, long, thick braids with some copper bands and bangles in there, and equally feathers and flowers and vines and branches, forming sort of rudimentary headdress together with that well-groomed mane of hair. And Kynan stays behind Vata, looking at that semicircle of Varu now standing there waiting for them. Not necessarily hostile, but guarded, weapons out, but pointing at the air. And Vata rumbles a few words of greeting at Efka and her bunch, and Efka responds with a, to Kynan's ears, friendly, smooth-sounding reply. And Vata turns to Kynan and sort of grabs him by the shoulder and nudges him forwards and just signals through his body language and some raised, very hairy eyebrows that it's now probably the polite thing to stand before the elder and make your introductions. So Kynan takes a hesitant bow.
You come before the Gedovratka in troubled times, human, bearing signs of an old accord with the elves, no less.
Ratka is apparently half Khajiit from Skyrim, so sorry about that. And she pauses and gives him a long look, sort of sizing him up, and sniffs the air and...
I bid you welcome, you and your traveling companion.
And Kynan gets a very distinct sense that this spirit seer does not refer to Vata when she says that, but more likely has an inkling that Siora is somewhere in the vicinity, who has been uncharacteristically quiet throughout all of this, which to my mind is part of the expression that this nightmare drawing close and drawing around. The closer they get to the source, I think the harder it is for Siora to even find Kynan through all that interference, and she's somewhat disconnected. But here in this Varu circle of protection, we can sort of infer this as well from Vata holding a gnarled wooden staff, which is a little bit of light emanating from the tip of it. Just this warmth that Kynan senses now as he stands on the platform makes him think he's at least somewhat disconnected from the nightmare, and the proximity that he senses now that Efka also mentions it to Siora is once more stronger. He's not even really noticed the absence too much before. Too many things have happened since they last really interacted. So we take away that Efka also knows about the presence of the spirit that Kynan is bound to. And now that this warmth washes over him and that light of the staff sort of drives the darkness away, very, very literally but also metaphorically, he senses how weary and fatigued he is, and it shows in his whole stance and body language and voice.
I thank you, Seer. My journey has been troubled.
They are troubled times. Rest up until the morning and we shall speak.
And in a haze of greeting and being led through walkways, Kynan finds himself in a small hut with a mat on the floor, and he doesn't even have time to consider the level of discomfort that this rudimentary bed would cause in him normally. He's already fast asleep before he even hits the ground. And I think we can treat this like a sojourn roll as an extension of our positive match, because we're in a safe place. We can sleep at least a few hours and we can regenerate, hopefully, some spirit. Unfortunately, it's a plus heart roll because we tend to, at the moment, mainly roll things Kynan isn't particularly good at, so let's go. That would be a weak hit, and now I am struggling a little bit with the text here. If I interpret this correctly, so on a hit, you and your allies may each focus on one of your chosen recover actions. We can, on a weak hit, choose one, so we choose Consort, technically, even though what we're really doing is sleeping, but that is in an environment that is sort of created by having these other friendlies around and feeling safe for once. So we choose this recover action, and then we can roll plus heart again. If we share a bond, add +1. We don't. On a strong hit, take +2 more for this action. So I'm reading this as it would be +2 spirit, and if I now succeed at a roll plus heart roll, it's +4. I guess that's how we're gonna do it, because I wanna live. Okay, another weak hit. On a weak hit, take +1 more. So we can, based on this interpretation of the rules, move up to 3 spirit, which is a fantastically refreshed awakening now that Kynan probably falls into sleep somewhere at 2 or 3 in the morning. But even just this little rest of a couple of hours, 4 hours maybe, before the gray creeps in and wakes him up, and this restlessness and urgency he feels, and he feels conflicted when he wakes up. He feels calm settling in, but what he also feels once he opens his eyes is this surge of just fury and anger that boils up inside him before he realizes where he is, and this calm settles over him, and he feels at peace for first in a while. But it is a pretty stark reminder that there is some affliction still working inside of him that he may want to talk to Efka about, I think. So he awakens and shakes off that fury and embraces the calm, sees an earthen jar of water next to his mat, helps himself to a jar of water, fresh water, and some very simply smoked meat set out next to him. Not a lot of vegetables. I think the Varu are on something of a carnivore diet. And he rises and stumbles along the walkways that are somewhat unsteady under his feet, and he gets his bearings and moves a little more safely, securely, with better footing, because he is an agile operator overall. And he spots Efka standing, leaning on her staff, her face just turned to the rising morning sun and taking in the rays and the warmth of it, and lifting her head in greeting as she sees him approach.
Troubled dreams do not find you easily in this home of the Gelovratka, human. I trust you rested well.
Well enough, my thanks.
You have come for the father of nightmares, have you not? Him and his troubled child.
Huh. So it's true that this elf is Asha's father?
This is so, but a father he is not. It is not a word befitting to him. Alas, he has some use for one of his blood.
That does not sound good.
And I think there we can sort of summarize what Efka is running by Kynan now, which is effectively a little bit of a illumination on Ursula and Eren and Asha, so telling him that
when humans came to this land again, they did not act like treasured guests, and a conquering host is never welcome. But some among these newfound Ironlanders felt the call of the wild, and they saw the wrongness in their actions and that of their brethren. It was fertile ground for what your kind no doubt call a horrendous betrayal, and out of this betrayal a daughter was born. Only to repeat this betrayal once again. But now, alas, it is she who will be betrayed.
So we remind ourselves Eren seeing the wrongness of what her people were doing to the forest when the Ironlanders came over. The second wave of humans here, the first one being the Broken, that's why Efka refers to them as the ones that came again. Eren colluding with Ursula, the Nightmare Druid who sought to weaponize this intrusion of the Nightmare to drive these humans from these shores once and for all. It sort of worked, but a alliance of Varu and elves brought it down and to an end before it could spread, so this old village was wiped out. Eren's role wasn't quite discovered right away, so she got to safety in Redcrest, and Asha, the child of the Union, then becomes an entry point for Ursula to try and do a prison break, now that he's imprisoned here by the Gate of Ratka, and in the meantime he has corrupted part of the Gate of Ratka.
The dreams of the Unquiet One have befouled half of my tribe. We share an enemy, and I sense the strands of fate tied to you. Your words have meaning. You speak and create destiny. You are what your people call an Ironsworn, are you?
And Kynan just nods and holds up his vow maker, his metal hoop.
You are a strange one, human, connected both to the realm of the spirits and befouled by nightmare. Tell me, how many days has it been? Do you still control your anger?
2, perhaps 3, but it seems to be getting harder.
I can see it around you like a cowl of black mist.
Is there anything you can do?
Good question, actually. Is there? So we suppose that those markings that they use do have some kind of effect, and my sort of thinking is as well that the crudeness of the markings that we initially saw in the old village and replicated in some fashion also in the lumber camp, that is probably something that the Varu had first and then the elves adopted. So this is more a Varu thing than an elven thing. The question is, do they work? So I'd say let's give it maybe like a 50-50 to gauge whether there is something that Efka could do for Kynan. We'll call it 51 plus yes. 64, that's a yes. Now how do we reflect this outside of the fiction? I think what I may be fishing for here is perhaps just securing an advantage. And if we manage to, then maybe for a couple of days we don't have to necessarily deal with the advancement of the illness too much. And it might also make the final confrontation easier because it gives Ursula less leverage over Kynan. So let's maybe secure an advantage, but let's first figure out how that advantage securing might actually look, because the Varu sure have some way of addressing this affliction, but probably just a temporary one, because otherwise that old Warren wouldn't have been wiped out. The other Warren, I mean, that Vata was trying to dig out. So there's probably just a temporary reprieve through some kind of treatment. Perhaps we can envision this as Efka telling Kynan to follow her, leading him to some sort of sweat lodge, like a building that they've erected on one of the platforms that is was like an oven with an exhaust for smoke up top, and they burn fragrant branches. They make him strip off his armor and clothing, and they paint him in these earthen runes and make him sit in that sweat hutch, and through that sort of cleansing purification he can try and overcome the rage that is currently starting to flare up now and again inside of him. What would that be? Heart or wits or iron? Maybe it's just spirit, actually. Maybe we'll roll this one plus spirit. So let's do that. Let's secure an advantage rolling plus spirit. It's not the rules, but it kind of fits. So let's go. Oh. Not again.
I sense you keep rolling positive matches, human.
So I'll take that as a good sign, but also some kind of positive implication. Can they cure it at all? How would they? Like, why don't they do it for the rest of them then? There has to be some... If it's really a cure, there has to be some really limiting factor in how to do this. Or maybe it's just like, oh, this doesn't work on Varu, but it works on humans. That would be a bit lame, though. Let's do action and theme. Get an idea what's going on. 24, remove. That's actually going in the right direction. 08, weapon. Remove weapon. How would that help us in any way with this? It's like, we can cure you of this disease, but you must swear a vow of pacifism. I don't think so. Weapons are, well, interesting weapons are made of iron. Iron is rare. If iron is part of the cure, that would also explain why they aren't doing it in a grand scale, because they don't have iron. What could that look like? Let me pursue this for a second. So iron, not weapon necessarily, just as a launching point for the iron, I take the weapon and make the assumption that iron is somehow a way to, well, of course it is, because it can cut off this connection to the, haha, that would work actually. So if iron somehow comes into the picture in combination with those runes, we could disconnect Kynan from Arsula. And practically speaking, that would be, I think I got it. After what feels like an eternity in this sweat lodge, Kynan stumbles out and upends a pitcher of water, most of it running down his chin and smearing those runes painted on his form. And Efka is standing outside with a pensive look at Kynan's things piled up outside the lodge. The sword leaning against the wall of the little sweat hutch. The iron hoop piled on his tunic that's folded. And he senses her gaze. It doesn't bother him particularly as he gets dressed and turns to face her again.
There is a way to further assist you in defeating Arsula's encroaching whispers, human, but it requires sacrifice.
Nothing's ever free. What do you need?
It is less what I need and more what you need. The only way to sever you from the intrusions of Arsula lies in the strength of the iron you carry.
If you want my sword in payment, it's yours.
It is not payment, it is an ingredient. I do not need a whole sword, and you need this sword more, regardless.
And they both look at this sentimental value piece that Kynan has there, and he frowns and thinks it over, and eventually, after Efka walks him through what she intends to do with it, Kynan also thinks, well, I'm not really losing it as such, I'm just changing it, so I'm going to go along with it, and nods. And what happens then is that they retreat to Efka's lean-to at the tree trunk of the largest of the central trees that the walkways all connect to, and she takes that iron hoop and takes some implements that she has there, like a variety of iron implements as well, but more like small amounts of iron. Just a bone chisel with an iron tip and a bowl that is laid in with iron and covered in engravings. And she starts shaving the iron off the adornment that Kynan uses to swear his vows on. And these iron shavings just slowly pile up in this bowl. And before long, the hoop is just gone. just ground to pieces. Like as it starts falling apart, the bits go in and she starts sort of using an iron covered pestle to grind up the rest into like a fine iron mist, and then takes out another set of tools, lays it out in front of her, starts mixing some liquids together. At one point grabs Kynan's wrist, holds it over there and gives him a little nick so some blood drops into the bowl, stirs that, and once that's done, takes out another set of tools and bids Kynan just sit cross-legged in front of her fire as she takes out like an iron-tipped needle and dips it into this mixture of iron dust and ink and blood that she currently created, and starts stitching a painful, large tattoo of one of those runes on Kynan's chest. And while he endures some further hours of misery, that takes care of the affliction. He still has his material as well. He can now swear his vows on his tattoo. And we've cured him with a positive match. I feel like that's narratively quite satisfying, actually. And as much as I like props, I don't think I'll be getting this tattoo myself. So, bye. Oh, and we can take 2 momentum from securing that advantage. Now, the question is also, how do we proceed here in terms of what are the Varu willing to contribute, since it's half of their tribe currently with Arsula, and they know that they've lost the connection to part of their guardians. And now this human shows up, entangled in all kinds of contradictory webs of fate and connected to this spirit realm. And I'm pretty sure someone like Efka will read this as a sign. So I want to ask the Oracle whether it's likely that the Varu are willing to offer more than just like moral support, and are actually willing to maybe send along with or come along with Kynan some or pretty much all of their active warrior component, and maybe Efka herself too, since I don't see how Kynan will resolve this by himself. Like he rocks up in a barrow filled with angry Varu and a demigod elven nightmare druid. What's he gonna do? I think we need the fiction to provide us with some allies. But I don't want to just decide it, so I think we're gonna call it likely, so 26 plus, that they are willing to invest more than just good words and a cure, because it's also in their own best interest. That is a 95. Well, I'd say they're quite motivated, which makes sense. And I think they might even be doing this without having Kynan swear another iron vow, because they really just do have aligned causes here. There's no need for Kynan to have any further motivations, and I think Efka also sees this in him. So I think we'll acquire some traveling companions as Kynan sets out the next morning. But maybe we get a bit of an idea in how many they are contributing. Maybe we'll do a representative roll here just to get a degree of success on what they can spare. And we'll reflect this as a compel move. Maybe as Kynan is healing his recent tattoo branding that he's received in the evening over a shared meal with Efka and some of the other Varu luminaries of the settlement, we have a discussion erupt where we're trying to compel them, not even like directly, but more as a natural flow of this conversation, where Kynan finds out and points out that they have a shared interest, and that would they not be willing to come with him to confront this nightmare druid now? That is their charge anyway. So basically, why am I doing a job for you? Now, we don't have a bond here. We do have a common cause though, and it's another hard roll, and I think without wanting to fudge it too much in the direction, but it just makes sense to me, so I'm gonna give him a +1 here. On a strong hit, they'll do what you want or share what they know. Take +1 momentum. We do not use this to gather information. We just do this to find out how willing they are to support us, and I think they are very willing. So now, the next morning, when Kynan sets forth from the Get of Ratka's settlement in the thicket, he is accompanied by a whole host of Varu that will accompany him on this delve. So he is now with a Varu warband and with Efka, let's... Is she too old for this shit, or is she coming along? Cunning and brave, likely. 71, she is coming along because she is brave. But we still have to continue to the actual place, and this is also a dangerous trek now for the Varu, because this forest is no longer friendly to them, having been half occupied by the corrupted part of their get. So I think we should still continue this delve, but the combat encounters that we will potentially get, unless it's something really, really strong, are very likely gonna be a little steamrolled now. So let's delve the depths, and we do this with edge, we do this with haste. That is a strong hit. We mark progress and find an opportunity. Find an opportunity. 96, you encounter another Denizen who might support us. We're like on a recruitment spree here now, apparently. Denizen means Denizen Matrix, so let us enter the Matrix. 21, we encounter a helpful gloom. Let's re-roll that, because 12 is also a gloom. 98 is a gnarl. Is that not like a treebeard kind of fellow? An ent? Thick, sturdy leg, tough hide, textured like old bark, majestic horns, sorrowful call. Not quite, I guess. Gnarls dwell in woodlands throughout the Ironlands. The tallest of them are nearly the height of towering trees, with long neck and legs as stout as trunks. Atop their heads are sprays of horns which twist and intertwine like slender branches. Ah, okay. They roam the forest alone or in small family groups, feeding on they feed on liches, leaves and other plants. They are not naturally aggressive, but mighty foes when threatened. March of the Ents on Arsula. Yes! Okay, and they're helpful. Maybe this is even something intentional. Maybe this is where Efka is now putting out all the stops, and we're not just encountering them, we're seeking them out. And we are marching this warband into a clearing of gnarl, and there's like a family unit of them standing there basking in the morning sunlight, now going on midday, that is shining down on them. And after a brief rumbled conversation where Efka is able to converse with them, and the gnarl leader, the elder with a long viney beard and majestic horns, is sort of rumbling in a very slow, like, kind of voice. And then maybe we acquire like 2 or 3, like the elder and 2 of the younger adolescent and young adult gnarls that are rumbling forward with us now on this trek to confront the corruption. Very cool. And I think instead of taking momentum, we're just levering this opportunity into the next delve move, just to reflect that we are now basically traveling with an unstoppable force, which makes it a lot more likely that our progress is going in a positive direction. So let us make another delve move. And that's it. It's another positive match. Okay. Let's see what the opportunity is that we find first. 28, an aspect of the history or nature of this place is revealed. And this becomes a positive opportunity. Well, first of all, it becomes a Mark 1 progress, putting us up to 6 progress. And then we have to figure out what part of the history gets revealed and how this benefits us. And we will do this next time, because I'm out of time. So thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you next time, and bye for now.